Just as the Mandalorian is very calculated in protecting the child, we're going to do some calculations today. Calculations we'll start with are on Dear Density, number 1. Calculate the density of Kelly Farr's mountain bike if a 200 gram sample has a volume of 50 centimeters cubed. We have a rectangle around the item and the GUIDE guide listed here. So you want to take a look at page 0 of your study guide where the guide steps will always be listed. For items surrounded by rectangle, follow these guide steps to work towards greater proficiency. Now these steps were developed not to be a source of nuisance or extra busy work for you. I took in students from all different grade levels, 9 through 12, and proficiency levels, and asked them what are some steps we could develop to help a student who is home trying to work on the think and solve or practice items in the study guide and doesn't have an instructor right there by them guiding them through. So hence we have the guide steps here that if you follow these, you should be able to do very well on your own. So the first step is to jot down all the numbers given and make sure you have the units. And then when you have a complicated situation, make a sketch. If you have multiple situations, multiple time intervals, a starting, a middle, and an end to the problem. The unknown, determine the quantity you're solving for. Oftentimes the problem will say outrightly, calculate the density, calculate the mass, find the volume. Identify, arrange a matching formula for what you are given. Do the math. Substitute numbers and units for the variables and evaluate. Are the answer and units reasonable? Do they make sense? So we're going to calculate the density of Kelly Farr's mountain bike if a 200 gram sample has a volume of 50 centimeters cubed. So first thing we want to do is jot down all the knowns. Let's jot down, we have 200 grams. We've got that number, a volume of 50 centimeters cubed. And we're trying to calculate the density. So density is what we're after. Grams right here, that's an SI unit for mass. So we've jotted down all the numbers. Probably don't need a sketch of the bicycle. We determine we're solving for density and arrange a matching formula. So we can use the density is mass per unit of volume. And we're solving for density, so it's arranged. Put the numbers in. Mass 200.0 divide by 50.0 centimeters cubed. So really we're asking how many 50s will wholly fit into 200, and that is 4. Now we have to ask ourselves, do we put a decimal zero or not? And the rule for your measurement accuracy is you cannot be more accurate in your answer than the least accurate data you were given. So we have 1 decimal value here, 1 decimal value here, so we will maintain 1 decimal value there. And we have a gram divided by centimeter cubed, gram divided by centimeter cubed. Now evaluation, 4 grams per centimeter cubed. It's a pretty reasonable density. We'd be concerned if her bike was 400 grams per centimeter cubed. But on the other hand, her density of the bike is 4 times that, the density of water, as water is 1 gram per centimeter cubed. But it would be impressive if you were able to get a bicycle that was able to float in water. So probably pretty reasonable answer here. So Kelly and her love for biking. Several years ago, she was a student teacher at Mountain Crest. You might recognize Rassy Rass, Crazy Lynchy Lynch, some weirdo there, and good old K-Far. She then graduated from student teaching, Student Teacher of the Year, and went on to become a biology teacher at Skyview. And she also teaches astronomy. And they decided to make a human as well. So there's little old Penny. Number 2. What is the volume of Kristen Farr's running shoe if a 400-gram sample yields a density of 5,700 units? So we're going to follow the guide steps. We're going to jot down all the numbers. So we have 400-gram sample and 5,700 units. And what's the volume? The volume is what we're looking for. All right, mass for grams, and then we have a density of, so since we have grams here, we know this will be grams per milliliter or grams per centimeter cubed. So that's the density. We figured out we're solving for volume. All right, so density is mass per unit of volume, but I'm wanting to solve and find for volume. So I need to get volume by itself. So I'm going to multiply both sides by volume. And so that's going to give me volume times density is mass. But I want volume by itself. So now I'm going to divide both sides by the density. So to find the volume, I'm going to take the mass, divide by the density. The mass is 400.0 grams, didn't copy over the 0 there, and divide by this density of 57 hundredths of a gram per milliliter. My volume will then be, we're looking at how many halves essentially go into 400. We're just a tad over a half, so if it were half, it would be 800. So it's probably just under 800 for our value. 701.754. Now the question here is, how many decimal places can we have on our answer? You can never have more in your answer than the least amount you started with. And the least amount I started with, well, here's 2 decimal places in the 5700ths, 1 decimal place there. So I can only have 1 decimal place. The volume 701 decimal. So I'm allowed 1 decimal. It's a 7 followed by a 5. Because this number after the decimal is 5 or more, we're going to round up. And the unit's grams per milliliter. We did the math. Now we got to evaluate. All right, so 700 grams per milliliter. Oh, we have milligrams canceled out here. Divide, divide. That'll be the inverse. So you actually end up with 702 about milliliters, which is just over a half liter. If this was 7,000 milliliters, like 7 liters, that would be a very large shoe size for Miss Kristen. So 700 milliliters, probably good volume for a small foot to fit into. And Kristen, exceptional track athlete. And Kristen a few years later, and she has discovered the fountain of youth, her family, and myself constantly harassing her for what's the secret to never grow older. Here we have what will be the mass of Andy Davis's golf club if its volume is 450 milliliters and a density of 1 97/100 of units. Okay, so jot down all the numbers. We have 450 milliliters, so that's a volume. We have a density of 1 97/100 units. Now we have the milliliter, so we can go ahead and say grams per milliliter. And the mass is what we're after. So we've determined that. Now we need to arrange in a matching formula. We know density is mass per unit of volume, but I want mass. So to get mass by itself, multiply both by volume. And so mass can be found by taking the volume and multiplying by density. Now we plug in, do the math, substitute the numbers. So the mass will be 450 milliliters times 1 97/100 of a gram per milliliter. So the mass is equal to 886.5. And we have to check ourselves. We can never have more accurate in our answer than the least we started with. We have 2 decimal places here, no decimal places here, so we can't have decimal places in our answer. So we have 8. Now the next number calculated is a 5, so we will round that to a 7. And a milliliter multiplied by a gram divided by a milliliter, so milliliter times gram per milliliter. Those milliliters cancel and you're left with grams. So a golf club that's just under 1 kilogram, not too bad. You want some light golf clubs, but club heads, you want to have a bit of mass to them. Andy and some golf clubs. And here's Kristen and Andy in high school. And then fast forward a few years later, they decided to spend some more time together in their lives. And then they too have made some humans. It's actually another human there we should have had of Stetson. I want to draw your attention to the think and solves here, and especially number 4. What is the density of a 60 kilogram sample of kryptonite with a volume of 20 milliliters? Well, we have a density we're trying to calculate, and the volume is 20 milliliters, and the mass is 0.6 of a kilogram. Now you want to be careful because we have mass in kilograms and our volume in milliliters. You can calculate density as kilograms per liter, or we more commonly see grams per milliliter. So you need to first convert this kilograms to grams. Then you can take your mass and divide by volume. For checking for measurement accuracy, we have 2 decimals, so the answer can have 2 decimals as well.